Oh. Hello and welcome to the Thursday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast, sponsored by Dabble. I'm your host, Kirien Sprecher. That's fantasy basketball guru Adam King. Today we have a special trade deadline edition of the podcast. We'll be breaking down all of the fantasy relevant news from today's moves before our usual Q&A stuff. If you're looking for the scoops, the insight on any of the trades that happened in previous days, check out the pods from Tuesday and Wednesday. I broke all of those trades down with Nick Whalen and Mike Barner. So you can check those out on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. All right, Adam, I wasn't sure if we should, do this chronologically, starting with the KP Kuminga trade last night. But my journalism schooling was screaming at me not to bury the lead here. So let's just start with Ivica Zubac to the Pacers. Zubac and Kobe Brown to the Pacers, Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, 2 first-round picks, and a second-round pick heading back to Los Angeles. What are the fantasy fallouts from this trade here, Adam?
Yeah, it's actually a hard one to sort of evaluate exactly what's going to happen here because we don't know. Like the Pacers need to keep their pick now. Like they need to, because this is top 5, 1 to 4 protected. So if they fall outside the top 4, the pick goes to the Clippers. The Pacers definitely don't want that. So currently, I think they have the 3rd worst record in the league, the Pacers. So they're going to want to ensure that they finish with one of those worst records. So does that mean that Zubac is limited here? He's not injured as such, but he has had an injury this season, so they could lean on that as injury management. Fantasy value doesn't impact Zubac. You can't drop him. He's not available, so there's no changes there. But I guess the question is then what happens with Jay Huff? And now that Isaiah Jackson is gone, is Jay Huff going to play a little bit more? I guess that's a soft yes, but we also saw Isaiah Jackson out for a while and Jay Huff was in and out. They went with Pascal Siakam as a center. They've got Micah Potter there. So to me, there isn't sort of a clear, hey, we have to go and add Jay Huff here. I think we have to wait and see. I still think Jarace Walker is probably the guy we want to have in terms of silly season for the Pacers. And for the Clippers, I think immediately, as soon as Zubac was gone, everyone went, let's go and add Brook Lopez. I'd be cautious. I think, sure, but we saw no Zubac for, what did he miss? 3 weeks or something with an
ankle injury? A couple weeks.
Yeah, and Lopez was fine, but he's not going to play more than about 22 to 24 minutes a night. There's no incentive for them to play him. So I wouldn't run to add him. I just don't think that he's got enough in the tank to actually give you significant value here. Conan Niederhauser was interesting to me, but then it was announced that Isaiah Jackson was also heading there. So that, I think, complicates things. But I think that they will want to see Yannick. And from what we've seen at Summer League, I thought he was pretty impressive. And he's in spots this season. He brings a little bit Dylan Cardwell kind of. He just brings energy, brings a bit of a shot blocking presence. So he would probably be, if you want to take a bit of a flyer, it might be Conan Niederhauser, just given the direction that they're likely headed in here.
Yeah, Jackson Campbell in the chat is on the same wavelength here. He says, hear me out, Yannick Conan Niederhauser. I agree with your sentiments about how he performed at Summer League. And, it was a little bit more exciting before that Isaiah Jackson news. And Isaiah Jackson is, probably not going to run away with the starting job or even the backup job, but he is probably going to play pretty consistently, which will limit everybody's. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was Jarace Walker. I do believe that he's still probably the player we want. Zubac probably going to rest, like you said. They need that pick, even though Zubac is not a guy that will probably take kindly to resting or sitting out games. And then obviously with Mathurin out, Walker has been playing a lot of center recently, right? With Jay Huff out of the rotation. But with Mathurin out, there's just going to be a ton of shots available in that second unit, when Nembhard or Nesmith are on the court there. So I totally agree with all of that. This was definitely the biggest trade of the day, but it doesn't really like have that big of an impact on this season, right? This is a trade the Pacers made for next year and for the future when they can pair Zubac with Halliburton there. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
No, I don't think so. Keep in mind, though, that Obi Toppin is nearing a return, so the Pacers will probably want to get him back in the lineup in some way, shape, or form. So that could impact Jarace Walker a little bit. But again, I think it's going to be guys like Nesmith and Nembhard that will be rested. I don't think they pull the plug completely, and I don't think they have to. But yeah, I would certainly just monitor the situation there in Indiana and see. But yeah, if you have Zubac, it's probably unfortunate.
Yeah.
But look, maybe they do play him for a month and then ease back. So maybe he is okay leading into the fantasy playoffs. But I think once we hit April or even late March, there's a chance he's not playing.
Yeah, and Zubac is definitely one of those winning player guys. Whenever he plays, he's going to be playing to win, and so they have to save them from themselves sometimes,
That's right. And the Pacers know exactly who he is. This is not him coming in. Let's see. Like, he'll be a perfect fit. He'll be great alongside Halliburton. So they don't actually need to experiment or anything too much with him. So yeah, that's again unfortunate if you have him on your roster, but let's hope that you get some production.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, we'll just touch on Isaiah Jackson again quickly. I don't think he's worth picking up in fantasy. I would lean more towards Niederhauser as the long shot, claim here. I think even if Jackson does get into the rotation, he's going to play limited minutes. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we have to wait and see what they do because obviously Lopez is still there. This could ultimately end up being a situation where Lopez isn't even in the rotation and they're just playing Jackson and Niederhauser, some sort of a minute split. So, look, maybe there's some back-end value there for him. Deeper leagues, sure, you could take a chance. But, yeah, I'm not super excited at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest winners of today were the Oklahoma City Thunder because they have the Clippers pick for next year, right? So this was a big swing for the Pacers in that regard too. So yeah, Adam, I think the second biggest news of the day were the trades that didn't happen, right? Ja Morant wasn't traded, Domantas Sabonis wasn't traded, and Giannis wasn't traded. Let's just start with Morant. Are we still holding on to Ty Jerome, Cam Spencer? Do we think Scottie Pippen can have a role here? Is Ja Morant even going to play again this season? What are your thoughts on the Grizzlies backcourt moving forward now that Ja's still there?
Yeah, it sounds like they tried to move him, but no one was seriously wanting to consider him. And obviously, given his off-court history, that's maybe not surprising, the culture that he brings, that sort of thing. So, yeah, look, if you've got Ty Jerome, if you've got Cam Spencer, this is obviously not the news that you wanted. Does he play again? I'm not sure. The Grizzlies, they're obviously tearing it down because they moved Jaren Jackson. They've got all these young pieces coming in. So I think there's a chance that Ja doesn't play. I think he probably does, but it's definitely a chance. For now, I think you hold those guys, that Cam Spencer and those guys. But, yeah, you're going to have to reevaluate if Ja Morant does come back, obviously.
Yeah, totally agree. And I don't think, we're really in the right space to speculate on if he'll play again this season. That's just going to kind of be a wait and see here. And, obviously the Grizzlies trading Desmond Bane last offseason, trading Jaren Jackson a couple days ago, fully, gearing up towards a different future in mind. So maybe even if, when he's healthy, maybe they just are saying, you're not part of the future. We don't need to play you anymore. What about Sabonis? Sabonis is still in town. It seemed like this back injury I think it was a back injury, was going to be kind of serious, but he returned last night, had a pretty strong double-double. Are we still holding on to Dylan Cardwell and Maxime Reynaud here? Or what are your thoughts on Sacramento's front court with Sabonis sticking around?
Yeah, very similar to the situation in the backcourt in Memphis, where we were hoping that that he would be somewhere else. And honestly, the Kings didn't make a move, so I don't know what they're doing in Sacramento. They've held all their veterans. So I'm not locked in with their fan base, but I would assume they're probably not too happy right now,
Yes.
Given their direction, and whether they were just asking too much for these players, I don't know. But yeah, look, obviously, if you've got Dylan Cardwell, if you've got Maxime Reynaud, this is not the news we want. I mean, Sacramento, I think they have the worst record in the league, maybe, or equal worst. They're right down the bottom. I know they're worse than the Pelicans now. So I guess the obvious sort of situation here is, yes, they're going to rest these guys and play their young players, but they're losing with everyone available. So is that really necessary? I'm going to hold Cardwell. Personally, I'm going to hold Cardwell in a couple of leagues and just, we're that close to the All-Star break now that we can reevaluate after, and maybe we get some sort of indication as to what their direction will be regarding DeRozan, Levine, and Sabonis, and I guess Westbrook to a lesser extent. For now, yes, I would hold, but it's certainly not ideal.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really has any idea what's going on in Sacramento, Adam. No. So I don't think you're too out of the loop there, and I definitely think fans of the Kings are pretty livid if there are any left after the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So Giannis seems like he's sticking around. Seems like the Bucks may not even trade him this offseason. They might try to acquire more pieces. I don't know how doubling down on that all-in move is going to work for them, but we'll see. How does if Giannis does come back, after the All-Star break, is that going to make Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, are they going to lose all their value in fantasy, or can they still have some value even if Giannis plays down the stretch?
I think they'll still have some value. I think obviously they'll take a hit, but it'll be more like Bobby Portis, Kyle Kuzma. Those guys are going to lose value. Miles Turner has been better of late. He probably takes a hit. In terms of, the whole Giannis situation, I worry for the Bucks and for any Bucks fans, because if they do double down on this and try to build a team around Giannis and it doesn't work, which, let's be honest, it probably won't, do they lose Giannis then for nothing? Like they've got an opportunity at the moment to trade him, but if his contract ends and he just leaves, then they're really in trouble. So this off season is now going to be really interesting to see if Giannis is of the opinion that the team can put enough pieces around him, because as it currently stands, they're a long way off being close to that.
They're a long way off from just competing in the Eastern Conference, and then everybody in the Eastern Conference is a long way off from competing against anybody in the West. So I absolutely agree with that. And my Bucks takes, I've said it quite a few times. I thought the Bucks should have traded Giannis last offseason, but instead of going out and spending $100 million on Miles Turner, that's when they could have gotten the biggest reward for him. Now Giannis's injury history the last couple of years, the older he gets, the less return you're going to get. Down the road we go. So let's touch on the trade from last night real quick. Kuminga finally gets traded away from Golden State. Kristaps Porzingis comes into town. Buddy Hield goes to Atlanta with Jonathan Kuminga. Where does Kuminga fit in Atlanta with you? Do you think he's going to outplay Ricochet? Do you think he can move into the starting lineup, or do you think he's just a backup behind Jalen Johnson?
I think he's probably a backup. I don't think they're going to bring him in to start him. I think they just brought him in as a way to get off the Porzingis contract. And it's really a sort of a low risk, high reward kind of situation, because if he pans out and can produce at the level which some people think he can, then it's a win for them. If he doesn't, they haven't really lost anything. So I think he'll just come off the bench. He'll at least be in the rotation, so that's a win for him and for anyone that wants to roster him. He should play. Luke Kennard is gone as well, so that sort of free, or the need for scoring off the bench is still there. So, look, I do think he plays, but I think he probably plays 22, 24 minutes a night off the bench. look, maybe they reevaluate. If he comes out and lights it up, then maybe they look to bring him into the starting lineup. But if they were going to move Zachary Risacher out of the starting lineup, they would have done it by now, I think. So for me, I think he's just a sixth man, seventh man kind of player.
Yeah. The Hawks love to start Risacher and then play him 23 minutes every night and not in the closing lineups. So obviously the other side of this is Porzingis goes to Golden State, and Porzingis is the stopgap here for the Jimmy Butler injury. Theoretically, when you're dreaming up or you're playing 2K or whatever, Steph Curry and Kristaps Porzingis is a really fun combo, right? It should be.
Yeah.
But there's one, glaring asterisk, and that's Steph. Steph Curry's getting old. We can throw that in there. And Kristaps Porzingis cannot stay on the court. I don't think this really helps Golden State win this year. I think it helps them at least be a little bit more competitive, maybe a little bit more fun, keeps Steph Curry entertained, engaged. But this doesn't really have many fantasy implications, does it?
I don't think so. I guess maybe there's some more incentive for Porzingis to play here, but it's not. He's not playing because he doesn't want to play or anything. This illness that he's dealing with is a real thing, and it's not going anywhere. So that's not going to change, even though his team has changed. So yeah, on paper, yeah, look, it's a good move. Getting off Kuminga, they didn't want him around anyway. So again, for them, it is sort of low risk, high reward. If Porzingis can somehow stay healthy, maybe he can help this team push into the playoffs or something. But yeah, I think there's also a chance that he barely plays for them and they end up sort of falling out.
For sure. Yeah, after the Porzingis Kuminga trade last night, we got the action started really early this morning, and I thought that was going to lead to more trades, but like we were talking about before we hopped on, it wasn't quite as an exciting deadline as we thought. Obviously, some exciting trades the last couple of days, but the hours leading up to the deadline weren't super juicy. But early this morning, the Bulls got involved in another trade. It seems like they're involved in every trade, and they sent Ayo Dosunmu to the Wolves, and the Wolves have needed a guard all season. They traded Nickeil Alexander-Walker last offseason, right? He was fantastic. He was fantastic for them the last couple of seasons off the bench. Mike Conley is getting old. He got traded away. The Wolves needed a guard. They went out and got Dosunmu. As a Bulls fan, I think this is a very good deal for the Wolves, and I'm kind of upset to see Dosunmu go. I feel like if we paid Patrick Williams $18 million a year, the Bulls probably could have paid Dosunmu $18 million a year, but whatever, I digress.
Yeah.
I was just excited to see the Bulls actually in trades. What do you think about Dosunmu in Minnesota? Obviously, Dosunmu is rostered in a lot of fantasy leagues because of all of the injuries in Chicago recently. He's been playing pretty well. Obviously, he's going to take a little bit of a hit here, right? But do you think he's still worth rostering in standard leagues?
Yeah, I think he takes a hit in terms of he's had good opportunity in Chicago because of the injuries to like Kobe White's been out, Trey Jones, Josh Giddey. So they've all been out. If they'd been healthy, he probably was a back-end 12-team guy at best. So I think if we compare this opportunity to what his perceived opportunity in Chicago was going to be this season, maybe it's a small bump up because there's not as much depth in Minnesota. So maybe he plays 26, 27 minutes a night compared to 22 or 23. But I don't think he's playing 30 or 31, which he has been doing from time to time for Chicago. So probably a bit of a hit from where he's been, but maybe a safer situation than where he would have been if the Bulls had been healthy this season, because I think he probably moves ahead of Bones Highland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's the case here.
Which makes him that sixth man, I suppose, with Naz Reid, a backcourt and a front court sixth man option. So he could still have limited value, but the ceiling's not that high.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. The sixth, seventh man rotation with Dosunmu and Reid, I think that'll be very good for the Wolves moving forward here. All right, before we get into some questions from the chat, I have a quick word here from Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big. You can win up to 5,000 times your money this basketball season. Starting with Dabble is easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. All right, I just have a couple of quick news notes here before we get into the questions. The last couple of names I wrote down here were Jose Alvarado. Similar to OKC trading Jared McCain and then announcing SGA was going to be out for a while. The Knicks traded for Alvarado and then announced Miles McBride was going to be out for a while. Mm-hmm. Not saying that SGA and Miles McBride are comparable players, but clearly some savvy moves here by some organizations making these deals and then announcing long-term injuries so it doesn't seem like they're super desperate. Do you think Alvarado is going to have a consistent role in this rotation? Do you think it's kind of going to be a Alvarado, Kolek, Jordan Clarkson trio going back like a carousel going around and around here? What are your thoughts on this Alvarado to New York trade?
Yeah, I think he'll have a role, but as you said, they do have Tyler Kolek there. They do have Jordan Clarkson. So I think it'll just be a bit of a timeshare. He'll pretty much slot into the Miles McBride role, but obviously doesn't bring as much offensive upside as McBride, but a better defender. So it will be a little bit matchup dependent. There'll be games when he plays 25 minutes and then games when he plays 12.
Totally agree. Timeshare, carousel, whatever you want to call it. The last name here I have is Cam Thomas, Adam. Right after the trade deadline, Cam Thomas was waived. Cam Thomas was not a very good fantasy player this season in Brooklyn. Do you envision him getting to fantasy relevancy again? And if that's the case, what team would you envision that him joining and doing that?
Yeah, this one obviously came in really late. We were trying to speculate on the deadline show as to where we thought he might go. Apparently he had trade veto thing, like he was able to. So that's obviously no one came to the party that he was interested in. So he's just going to go on the open market now. I don't know. I don't think. It's hard to know where he's going to go, where he fits. He's obviously still a really good basketball player. Defensively, he has some concerns, but that's not unheard of in this league. So it's whether a contender wants to bring him in as a floor spacer. So someone like a Detroit who need floor spacing, maybe they look to bring him in. Whoever gets him is going to get him on a good deal. So maybe it's them, maybe it's the Lakers. I mean, they always need floor spacing. Or is it a team like Sacramento, Washington, one of these bottom sort of cellar dwellers who just think let's bring him in, let's play him 25 minutes and see what we can get out of him. So it's hard. I don't see him stepping into a 30-minute a night role anywhere.
Yeah.
But obviously, if he was on one of those poorer teams, maybe we do get him to the point where he can have some value in fantasy.
The Kings signing Cam Thomas would be very, very hilarious. Steven says, I am a Kings fan. We still do exist. So I wonder what Steven's thoughts on Cam Thomas to the Kings are. That would be pretty funny. So like you said before the show began, not the most exciting deadline, but a lot of moving parts here today. And there's definitely going to be some fantasy fallout. So, lots of questions here in the chat. So let's start off at the top. Renzo says, what are your thoughts on Josh Minott? Or Josh Minott, sorry. Why not Minott? Obviously he was traded to
Brooklyn.
The Nets. Yep. I couldn't remember what that deal was. I think in Brooklyn, obviously, their silly season is going to be a thing here. But they had 6 draft picks, something like that last year. They're going to prioritize a lot of those guys. So I don't think Minott is really a player worth monitoring in fantasy at this point. How about you, Adam?
No, we've seen from Brooklyn how this plays out. Like they just play 15 guys, 18 minutes each. Yeah. So Minott will just slot into that rotation. So yeah, I don't see this as a situation where you need to go on it. There were players that will have more value than him that were traded.
Absolutely. All right. We already talked about Isaiah Jackson, James Chan, but what about Nick Richards? There's a couple of Nick Richards questions here in the chat, Adam. Is he worth picking up to you in your mind?
We talked about him a lot, actually. So he's in Chicago now. And they obviously have Jalen Smith. They got rid of Vooch. So the question is, do they start Nick Richards and keep Jalen Smith at the 4? Kobe White has just been ruled out until after the All-Star break. So that I've just seen that pop up. So Kobe White is gone for the next, well, it's only a week, but maybe. So Nick Richards would be someone, I think, if you've got an open roster spot, you could take a flyer on him. We know enough about him to know that he's not going to be a league winner. He's not going to come in and put up these sort of fantastic numbers. But if he gets 26, 28 minutes a night, he can put up a double-double. He can get you sort of 1.2 blocks. He's pretty efficient because he really only dunks the ball. So if the Bucks decide to actually get a look at him, but he could just come off the bench behind Jalen Smith and play 18 minutes, in which case he's not.
Yeah, I think this Nick Richards news, obviously he was traded to Milwaukee in this weird Cole Anthony, Amir Coffey, Nick Richards, Nigel Hayes deal. And then right before the deadline, Richards was rerouted to Chicago with Dieng going to Milwaukee. I think this trade means more for Jalen Smith's fantasy value than it really does Nick Richards. I know Mike Barner's really high on Jalen Smith. I was high on Jalen Smith. I think Nick Richards is going to eat in that playing time a little bit. Jalen Smith can play some 4, so I'm not saying that we have to drop Jalen Smith, but I do think this is a little bit of a hit to Jalen Smith's fantasy value. And I'm not picking up Nick Richards in any league, maybe a 16-team league with deep roster spots, but don't think he's worth rostering right now. Intrepid says, hi, gents. Fair to say that both Rollins and CMB are trade deadline winners. What about Jalen Smith, even with Richards in? Still feels like a whole net gain. Yeah, we already talked about the Jalen Smith-Richards thing. Ryan Rollins, I don't think Cole Anthony's presence really was digging into Rollins' game much. And the Raptors did add a big. They traded for Trace Jackson Davis. Huge move. No, obviously not that big of a deal there. But yeah, I think CMB should be very good. And obviously he's a big winner without Sabonis coming into town. And I think Rollins is fine, and he's always going to be fine, even if Giannis comes back. Anything to go on this question here, Adam?
No, look, I would say that I think you could argue that Rollins is even a loser because Giannis didn't move. So if Giannis comes back and plays, he cuts into Rollins' just opportunities on the court. He'll still play a significant role, but he's just not required to do as much. And yeah, you're right. Cole Anthony wasn't impacting him at all. The return of Kevin Porter does.
Yes, true.
But yeah, Colin Murray Balls, I think that we have no indication as to when or when Pirtle is coming back. So yeah, I think Colin Murray Balls, you just continue to hold him, and same for Mamu Kalashvili, who's still doing bits and pieces.
Yeah, every now and again. So the Pirtle update was that he, received some pain relief treatment on his back. That's not he's going to be back anytime soon. No. That's like you receive this treatment, then you rest for a couple of weeks, and then you start basketball activities up again. Yeah, totally agree with all of those thoughts on that one. Intrepid also asked, do you think that Nurk is going to be shut down for the rest of the season? I don't know if rest of season. I keep saying that I think this is they're just going to keep doing what they have been doing, where Nurk plays one night and then Jackson plays one, and they go back and forth. Which, from a fantasy perspective, you might as well just shut them down for the rest of the season, right? Because it's going to be really hard to roster him. So, Intrepid, I would say no. I don't think he's done for the season, but yes, his fantasy value is going to take a big hit here. Is that fair to say, Adam?
Yeah. Again, much like with Brooklyn, we've seen what Utah, how they will play this. And yes, they are rebuilding. They've signed Jaren Jackson. So they have sort of flipped that switch, but they still want their draft pick this year. So the rebuild starts next year. So yeah, Nurkic, Markkanen, and this sort of sporadic resting is just going to continue, I think, for the foreseeable future.
What do we think about Garland getting shut down? Obviously, we talked about, the OKC owns the Clippers pick this year. So, the rest of the league is hoping that the Clippers can try to be competitive here. But do you think Garland is at risk of being shut down with Harden and Zubac gone?
I think there's a chance. He's been dealing with these toe injuries all season. So it's really going to come down to the mindset of the Clippers and whether like the rest of the league, they want to try and win games so that the Thunder don't get that pick. But with the incoming or expected kind of fallout from the whole Kawhi Leonard, whatever the scandal was, I can't think what it's called, but
aspiration,
yeah. So with that hanging over their heads as well, there's a chance that Kawhi is suspended at some point for I don't know how long, but yeah, there is. I'm not going to say Garland is going to be shut down, but I think there is certainly a chance that happens, especially if he comes back, plays limited minutes, and the toe just isn't getting better or it flares up, then he will almost definitely be shut down.
Yeah, I think they're going to be super, super cautious here, and I would be worried about a shutdown, but I think they're going to, try to get him on the court at least a little bit, like you said, Adam. Yeah, Jackson is asking about Ty Jerome. Yeah, we said earlier that we're probably holding Ty Jerome for until further notice here. Yo Joe, though, says Jarace Walker over Ausar, Camara, or Queta. IJax on the wire, too. Yeah, Ausar Thompson and Toumani Camara have been really disappointing this season. Queta has been pretty solid, but obviously Nikola Vucevic is there now. Are you taking Jarace Walker over Thompson and Camara at this point, Adam?
I don't think I would take him over Ausar. I know Ausar's been disappointing, but he just won Defensive Player of the Year, Player of the Month. So yes, he's not playing the minutes we want him to play, but he's doing enough in his 25, 26 minutes, I think, to be held. Camara, yeah, look, you could potentially consider him over Camara. He's been pretty disappointing. And as for Queta, as you said, with Vooch coming in, I think Queta is going to end up being a drop. We sort of talked again about this on the deadline show. Is there a chance they play Queta and Vooch together? Maybe. Obviously, Vooch can space the floor, but he's one of the worst defenders in the league. So you can't really put him out on the perimeter. But I don't know if you can put Queta on the perimeter either. So Ausar, no. Camara, maybe. Queta, I would wait and see. But if he's only playing 18 minutes, 20 minutes a night behind Vooch, it's going to be pretty hard to hold him outside of very specific situations.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll add here is when we're doing our discussions over at RotoWire about depth charts and lineups and starting lineups, etc., I said that Queta and Vucevic will probably be on the court, at some points during games, maybe not a ton of minutes. And I got some pushback by a couple of our experts saying that that's not going to happen. But the important part of this story is that all of the Celtics fans at RotoWire have told me that they think that Vucevic and Queta might even start together in the front court. So there's a lot of varying opinions about what's going to happen with Queta. So I'm still going to hold Queta for now. So yeah, I would say maybe Jarace over Camara here, but I still think I would be holding Ausar and Queta. John Collins in an 18 points league, Canez asks, I like John Collins in the short term, but I really think a lot of his value was tied to James Harden. James Harden's ability to play the pick and roll and find him open. Obviously, with with Zubac gone, maybe John Collins plays some more center, and that can be a boost to his production. But I like Collins more when Harden was there. I felt like that connection, Collins sitting in the corner, hitting open threes, getting some oops every now and then. So in an 8-team league, I would probably hope that there would be better, higher upside players available. But I think Collins is a safe option, right, Adam?
Yeah, I think he's safe. Much like you, I don't think, just with Isaiah Jackson coming in and Conan Niederhauser, like you would almost be relying on Collins to play at center and the fourth to sort of split his time across both. And maybe he plays a tiny bit more at center, but in an 18 league, if they're on a back-to-back, you could sort of stream him in for 2 games. But in terms of as you said, I would hope that there are options with more upside available. So yeah, I don't think you have to prioritize him in a league that shallow.
Yeah, same. Kingy says traded DeMar for Duren. I needed center depth and I was loaded on forwards. Is this a W? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Like Cloud says, 100% W there, Kingy. I don't think we need to talk about that too much. Jalen Duren's awesome. DeMar DeRozan, maybe Cam Thomas is coming to town and we'll steal some of DeMar DeRozan shots. But yeah, anytime you can get off a Kings player and go out and get a really productive player on one of the best teams in the league, that's a dub. Manila Most Wanted. I think Chicago really wanted Ivey so bad, and they have a plan for his future going forward. Can you confirm this? I cannot confirm this. Manila, we talked to Ricky yesterday on the Wednesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Show with Mike Barner. And we talked, and Ricky is a Chicago Bulls, beat writer. And he said that he was pretty excited about Ivey's future. He thinks that they want to extend him. I don't think Ricky also said he doesn't think that they're going to put a lot of pressure on Ivey to play and be super productive this year. Obviously, the trade of Kobe White and the trade of Dosunmu kind of solidifies the fact that they believe in one of these guards, Ivey, Simons, or Sexton. So maybe there's just going to be some competition between those three. I don't have any sources inside the front office other than what Ricky told us yesterday. But Manila, I think this is a realistic possibility, yes, that Ivey gets signed to a long-term extension in Chicago. Darby says GG Jackson or Jarace Walker for a points league, Adam. We had some questions about Walker earlier, but what about GG Jackson? Obviously, he started the game yesterday. Taylor Hendricks wasn't cleared to play it with the trade still processing. Do you think GG can find that fantasy relevancy that he had a couple of years ago again this season?
I think there's a chance. We had this exact question, one very similar, in the deadline show, and I think most of us leaned towards Walker for different reasons. My reasoning was that I think we've seen Walker's role. He's playing 30 minutes a night. He's putting up. There'll be some inconsistencies, of course, but his path to minutes is pretty obvious. And the trade deadline didn't really. I mean, Mathurin is gone now, so I think that path remains. For GG Walker, yes, he has a path at the moment, but if Ja Morant comes back, they also have Taylor Hendricks, they also have Walter Clayton, they also have Scottie Pippen. Like, there's just a lot of bodies coming back into this team. So I think right now, I think both of them should probably be rostered, but long term, I think Walker is probably the safer of the two.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And just for clarity, when I was making the depth chart changes, I put Taylor Hendricks over GG Jackson. I think Hendricks has just a higher of an upside just from his draft pedigree. And, he had the big injury as a sophomore, what showed some flashes as a rookie. And then this season, really hasn't even gotten any playing time. So I honestly think Hendricks has a higher upside than GG. And like you said, I think Walker's role is more consistent than GG, even though I do think, there's going to be some flashes with GG Jackson here down the stretch. Dennis, we talked about Isaiah Jackson a little bit earlier, probably not adding him in standard leagues at this point. Matt, 18 points in a tight spot. Do I deal with IR or drop one of them? Steph and PJ and IR, got Ty Jerome and Jalen Smith. Should I drop any? DeMar DeRozan, Andrew Wiggins, Najee, Kelly Oubre, Eason, Rollins. I could trade one for Fab. Fab is 0. Yeah, so I think just looking at this list of names, I think the first trade or first drop option might be PJ Washington for me. I would rather have PJ Washington, or I would rather have Najee Marshall over PJ Washington. Washington he's dealing with a concussion. He missed 7 of 8 games a little while ago. His production was pretty decent when he came back. But I just think Najee Marshall's role is more consistent. His usage is more consistent than PJ Washington. And then I would say, maybe Ty Jerome, and that would be just monitoring the Ja Morant situation. So I think it's either PJ Washington or Ty Jerome here for me. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I think I probably agree. I think PJ is in an 8-team league, he's sort of stream level. Maybe DeMar ends up being in that discussion as well if the King, but it's all dependent on what they do. Ty Jerome, look, again, Ja Morant comes back, Scottie Pippen comes in. I know Ty Jerome has been phenomenal, but there is absolutely no way he can keep up the production. He's still playing 20 minutes a game and he's putting up like top 20 numbers. It's just not possible. I think PJ would probably be the drop. And like we said, maybe if Nick Richards comes in and hurts Jalen Smith, maybe he trends toward a drop in an 8-team league as well.
Totally. Diver says, hi guys, what's the impact on Kawhi Leonard? Do we think Kawhi Leonard is going to keep playing down the stretch here for the Clippers after they've traded James Harden, they trade Ivica Zubac?
If he doesn't get suspended, then if he's still available, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he plays, but he's limited. Obviously, the injuries are a huge part of Kawhi and his fantasy game, and the Clippers they're not sort of winning too many games here. So, do they try to? Well, are they trying to move him? I guess is a question. Given that they've moved Zubac and they've moved James Harden, they're going into a rebuild here. Kawhi wouldn't fit with that timeline necessarily. So, do they just try to play him, prove that he's healthy, and try to move him in the off season? I'm not sure. Production wise, he should be fantastic if he's playing, but this does make me worried about what his rest of season value or the amount of games that he plays. That's a concern.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's go rapid fire through a couple more of these. Ranzo, we hit Josh Minott and Nick Richards. Swervin, take a flyer on GG in a 10-team league. Yeah, maybe, but there might be some better options out there. Matt, sell high on Ty Jerome or keep him. Yeah, I probably want to try to sell high, like Adam was saying. This production in 20 minutes is out of this world. No Fog says Jalen Smith or Nick Claxton rest of season. Obviously, with the Nick Richards situation, we've talked about Jalen Smith, but would you rather have Jalen Smith or Nick Claxton, Adam?
It's pretty close. I might go Jalen Smith just. Yeah. It's pretty close, but yeah, and I don't know. I mean, the Nets, we just don't know what the Nets are going to do. So I'd go Jalen Smith, but it's close.
So, even if the Nets don't tank, there's a very real possibility that they just get blown out in a ton of games too, and Claxton doesn't play. In the last 2 games, they lost by 16 points and 53 points, and Claxton played 22 minutes and 17 minutes in those games, and he wasn't in foul trouble at all. So I think Jalen Smith is just the higher upside play here. No Fog if you want to go that way. Music says over under 50% chance that AD plays again this season. I'm going to take the under on that one. Yeah.
Yep.
Peter John, another Jalen Smith question. Jalen Smith or Tobias Harris rest of season? This one is a little bit interesting to me. Harris gets a bad rap. I think it's just because he had that big contract early in his career, so people kind of put this, moniker on him as like he's a good player, but he's not worth the money. He's been pretty productive. I don't see his role changing. Obviously, the Pistons brought in Kevin Huerter, but I don't think that's really going to hurt Tobias Harris. I think that would hurt more Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland, Dennis Jenkins, those type of guys. I'm gonna say Tobias Harris just because I think he has a strong enough upside, especially when he's making his threes, and the Pistons are just a safer team in my opinion. How about and then the Nick Richards brings Jalen Smith just down a little bit. If that move hadn't happened, I probably would easily say Jalen Smith.
Yeah, I think Harris is certainly the safer of the two. Because his role is not going anywhere. He's playing those minutes. He's, as you said, he still puts up serviceable numbers. I picked him up in a couple of leagues this season and haven't even considered dropping him.
Yeah.
Jalen Smith, yeah, I think with the addition of Nick Richards, it just adds a couple of questions there. So I think if you're just looking for sort of someone you can plug into your lineup and almost forget about them, I'd go Tobias Harris. With Jalen Smith, you're sort of always going to be monitoring what that role looks like and the minutes, and who knows what Chicago are going to end up doing anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Don Sicario, we talked about Brook Lopez earlier in the show. Not confident that he's going to just be handed this starting role and play 30 plus minutes. We talked about Niederhauser. We talked about Isaiah Jackson, coming in. John Collins, Nicholas Batum can also play some small ball 5. Peter John also asked Jalen Smith, Pell Larson, Queta, or Tobias Harris. So this is just the same question, but we add Pell Larson and Queta in. You have to drop one of them though. I think it might be Queta. Is that fair here?
Yeah, in a points league, I think it might be. I mean, Pell Larson has been really good, and there's a question about to come up as well. It really comes down to Tyler Hero and when he comes back. Norm Powell has been upgraded to Queta. Oh no, I think he's available actually.
Yep.
He's been upgraded.
Powell and Wiggins are going to be available tomorrow.
So that hurts Larson, and then obviously the eventual return of Tyler Hero, who was upgraded to doubtful. So maybe he's getting closer to a return here. So at the moment it's probably Queta, but if they once healthy, it's probably Larson.
Yep, I think that's fair. That's kind of where I was leaning too. Lubo, we talked about Nick Richards, Peter John. One more question: Collier or Davion Mitchell head-to-head points? Thanks for your content. I think I'm going Collier here. I was a big Davion Mitchell guy all season, but what Collier's been doing recently, whether he's starting or not, it is very impressive. Over his last 12 games, he has 6 starts in that stretch. He's averaging 12 points, 3 boards, 8 assists, and 1.3 steals. He's shooting 50% from the field, 72% from the free throw line. I think Davion is solid, but like we were just talking about, Pell Larson has been playing really well. Norm Powell is healthy. Andrew Wiggins is healthy. Tyler Hero is not traveling with Miami currently, but he could be coming back here. So I think I'm going to take Collier and just, deal with the bumps and bruises that it takes rostering a player from the Jazz, right? Because I just think Collier has a higher upside.
Yep, agreed. I think Collier's been there's a far higher chance that once we get to March, Collier is playing 30 minutes a night regularly than Davion Mitchell.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions here. We'll try to get out at the 50-point mark here. Erwin says, is Kel'el Ware a drop, Adam? I've dropped him in one league, and I'm still rostering him in one league. So take that for what you want. What are your thoughts, Adam?
I think he probably is. Miami didn't make a move at the deadline, despite being linked to all of these players and all of these big names. They did nothing. So for Kel'el Ware, that's not a good thing, because we've seen that they don't really want to play him alongside Bam now outside of matchup-based situations. So, yeah, I think if you're still holding on to him, nothing happened here to change my mind in terms of his long-term value.
Yep, totally fair. All right, I got 2 more questions highlighted here. MF Jones says, Dyson Daniels or Josh Hart? So neither of these players were really impacted that heavily. Obviously, their teams made trades, but their roles are going to stay pretty similar. So 10-team, 9-cat. Would you rather have Dyson Daniels or Josh Hart? I think I'm just going to go Josh Hart here because he has the higher upside. Dyson has not really been a good 3-point shooter at all this year. His steals have they're still there, but they've taken a slight drop compared to last year. When he was at 3 steals per game, he's at 2 steals per game now. You also take a hit in the free throw department with Daniel. So I think Josh Hart is just the higher upside here guy.
Yeah, I mean, I love Dyson, but I would go Hart here. He contributes in more categories. Dyson is really just steals and assists. Yeah. Free throws aren't great. Doesn't hit threes. He looks really passive on the offensive end at the moment. He's a decent rebounder, but Josh Hart is a very good rebounder. So, I think I'd go Hart.
All right, I'm skipping a couple of questions. I'm really sorry about it, guys. If if we didn't answer your questions here, you can tweet at me at Sprecher, RW Sprecher, right, like the root beer, and I'll try to answer any questions on Twitter. I haven't been very active this morning just because of all the trades going on and all the action going on today. But you can always reach out to me on Twitter. I'll try to answer your questions. David has a panic trade for us, Adam. Paolo Banchero for Giannis. Owner is panicking. Who would you rather have for the rest of this fantasy season, Adam? Paolo Banchero or Giannis?
Well, Giannis is obviously the better of the two players. So if you're, it's risky. I think it would come down to. Sorry,
I'll just say that Giannis, Eric Neem of the Athletic said that Giannis is planning to play after the All-Star break. So we'll see where that goes, if that's reality or not. So I think if Giannis is the better player and he's available after the All-Star break, I think this one is pretty easy. It's just a matter of if you trust Giannis to play after the All-Star break, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would depend for me on where I am in the standings and IR capability, things like that. If you're pretty comfortable, if you're near the top of your standings, then yes, I would do it. But if you're sort of battling and in the mid-table and you need production, I would put my money on Paolo playing more games than Giannis, just because Orlando is still in the playoff picture, that they want to make the playoffs. The Bucks, who really knows? So yes, Giannis could come back, but he'll be limited, and maybe they rest him on back-to-backs. So there's a little bit too much uncertainty. But yeah, if you're in a position to take a bit of a risk, then I would go with Giannis.
Yeah, I think Giannis is definitely the risky play there. I was so high on Paolo from a real life and a fantasy perspective. He hasn't really reached the peaks that I thought he was going to yet. But maybe that'll happen here towards the stretch run. Really appreciate all the questions, everybody. We got over 700 live viewers right now. So if you like this content, please like this video and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. We come to you 4 times a week. Me and Adam do a Q&A every Thursday. We will answer all your fantasy basketball questions, help you win your fantasy basketball championships. If you love RotoWire, 15% off any subscription at RotoWire. Use the code YouTube15. Really appreciate it, everyone. Really appreciate you hopping online, Adam. Another trade deadline in the books, and now it's time for the fantasy playoffs to get underway here shortly. And all full steam ahead. You can plug any of the content you had. I know you did the trade deadline show earlier with some folks. So if you want to plug that, tell us where we can find that. I'm sure people would be interested in turning that one on right after this ends.
Yeah, so we did a trade deadline show on the Old Man Squad network. So I think it went for about 6 hours total. I didn't do the whole thing, but I was up at about 3:30 a.m. To get on the show. So yeah, look, it was good. Not a lot happened, but there was a lot of good discussion from fantasy analysts. One name I'll just mention quickly before we jump off: Tyus Jones is someone I'd keep an eye on in Dallas. So he was rerouted to Dallas, and D'Angelo Russell is gone. Not that he was playing anyway, but Ryan Nembhard and Brandon Williams have sort of been alternating and in and out. Tyus Jones, I would argue, is the best point guard of those three, and maybe Jason Kidd likes that. He'd be another name, a little bit like Nick Richards. Maybe if you want to take a speculative chance and pick him up, maybe he starts and plays 26 minutes a night.
I totally like this. Tyus Jones has been a productive player, throughout his career, not overly productive, but been a guy that's been in the league for, over a decade. Right.
Yeah.
And he just, this is lazy analysis, Adam, but there's something in Orlando. There's some curse in Orlando. Desmond Bane, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Tyus Jones. It just doesn't look. Jalen Suggs can never stay healthy. Franz is now, came back for the game in Germany. So yeah, a fresh start for Tyus Jones could mean wonders for him. And that team hasn't had a point guard all season, so I'm sure he'll get a chance there. So I really like that one. And with that, that'll end the Thursday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast, sponsored by Dabble. Really appreciate it, everybody. Talk to you later. Good luck in your fantasy leagues.